Chinese billionaire stopped in his tracks when janitor's daughter spoke perfect Mandarin at 3 a.m. The night was thick and suffocating, wraps of dark sky pressed down like a heavy blanket over the sprawling city of Shanghai. Somewhere far beneath the glow of bright neon signs and the distant hum of luxury cars, a simple janitor swept the floor of an empty corporate office. The world above was oblivious to the magic about to unfold. Suddenly, with a jolt, the silence shattered. A voice floated through the stale air, crystal clear and impossibly fluent, slicing through the night at 3 a.m. She spoke, the words weaving seamlessly into the void, cascading like soft rain in the shadows. That it was the janitor's daughter, a girl named May, who moments ago had been lost in her daydreams, blissfully unaware. Her father hadn't known she was listening. The billionaire, Zhang Wei, a man known for his cold persona and ruthless deals, stood frozen. He had just entered the office, all suited up and ready to plan his next power move. But the second her voice wrapped around him, it was like time stopped. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Those words, they were more than just phrases. They resonated, echoing secrets he had buried deep in his soul. May's eyes sparkled in the dim light, a dangerous glimmer of untapped potential. "Who are you?" Zhang whispered, his heart pounding in his chest as he stepped closer. The air between them buzzed with something electric and unexplainable, a force that felt both familiar and terrifying. How could this girl, just a child, speak his language so perfectly? And at this hour? The curiosity swelling inside him was deadly. She should have been asleep, tucked away from the world, yet here she was, an enigma wrapped in shadows, defying expectations. Everything around him faded away. The polished floors, the distant flickering of screens, none of it mattered now. Zhang Wei could feel his palms sweat, his mind racing as he took another step toward her. What kind of magic was this? Then there it was again, that unmistakable feeling of something wrong. A chill crawled down his spine as the soft rustling of her breath charmed the room. She spoke again, her voice now laced with a tremor. "They're coming for you, Mr. Wei, they know." Shock spread across his face like wildfire, his thoughts spiraled wildly, a whirlpool of dread and disbelief. He felt a lump forming in his throat. This little girl, with secrets spilling from her lips, she was speaking the unthinkable. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting shadows to crawl from the dark corners of the room. Was she a warning, a messenger? The thoughts clashed inside him, each one louder than the last. He knew he was running out of time. Just then, the office door creaked open slightly, and a flicker of movement drew Zhang's eyes. Could she really see something he couldn't? A faint sound echoed from the corridor, a thud, followed by hushed whispers. His heart raced. Was he being watched? Was his empire on the verge of collapse? The urgency of the moment was palpable, like a drum pounding in his head. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect." As Zhang turned back toward May, the weight of her gaze held him captive, filled with an unearthly confidence. This wasn't just a child. She was a glimpse into a future he hadn't imagined, a warning wrapped in sweetness. "Who are you really?" he asked, that panic giving way to a grudging respect. Her smile widened, but there was a turn of mischief in it, a spark that told him she knew much more than she let on. But before she could answer, the whispers grew louder, footsteps thrumming in rhythm like war drums. What was coming, and who would stand with him? Were the secrets he had buried finally clawing their way back to the surface? As the tension peaked, the door creaked wide open, revealing an empty corridor cloaked in darkness. All at once, Zhang felt a surge of urgency grip his chest. He peered back at May, who stood there, poised and ready, as if she held the key to a mystery much larger than the both of them. The air thickened, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the night was far from over. Something awaited them just out of sight, something that could change everything they knew. "What are we going to do?" he whispered, desperation tightening his voice. And as a shadow flickered at the edge of the light, he knew they were on the brink of an extraordinary revelation. Zhang's heart pounded louder than ever, echoing sinister thoughts in his mind. The darkness at the door stretched like a yawning chasm, a foreboding promise. He could sense an unwelcome presence lurking just outside, and the unchecked fear coursed through him like ice water. "Run," May whispered suddenly, her voice slicing through the mounting tension like a knife. But where could they go? The vast emptiness of the office felt like a trap. Zhang hesitated, torn between disbelief and instinct. Was this child, with her strange power and knowledge, leading him to safety or into deeper danger? He stole another glance toward the door, and then he saw it. A figure slowly materialized, tall, dark, and oozing menace. The man was dressed in a tailored black suit that practically swallowed the light. His face was obscured, but the threat was palpable. He stepped into the room like a predator stalking its prey, the confidence radiating from him felt like a punch to Zhang's gut. "Zhang Wei," the man called out, his voice smooth like silk but with an edge that cut. "How cliché, meeting at this hour. You thought you'd escape, didn't you?" Panic gripped Zhang, and his mind raced through every possible avenue of escape. The windows. But then he remembered the skyline view, the impossible height of the building. There was nowhere to run. May remained eerily calm, her eyes fixed on the figure. "I warn you," she stated, her voice steady, "you will not find what you're looking for." The man's lips curled into a sneer. "Is that so? A little girl thinks she knows something. Zhang, your little habits were never quiet. Your ambition has attracted dangerous eyes, especially the kind that won't hesitate to wash away any evidence of your misdeeds." Zhang's blood ran cold. How could this man know? Images of the questionable deals he'd made, the enemies he'd kept at bay, all surged in his memory. "What do you want?" Zhang demanded, attempting to project authority despite feeling the earth drop beneath him. "Let's just say I work for someone who wants to collect what you owe. You've crossed a line that comes at a price." The man's eyes finally glinted in the light, a menacing mix of desire and malice. May stepped in front of Zhang protectively, a shield of innocence. "You can't take him. The truth will burn through your lies," she declared defiantly. The man laughed, a low, rumbling sound that echoed through the hollow office like a death knell. "Ah, but sweet little girl, sometimes the truth is the least of your worries. The world does not tremble for fragile hopes." As he spoke, he began to take a step forward, and Zhang instinctively moved closer to May, feeling the warmth radiating from her small frame. His pulse quickened, not with fear alone, but a rising sense of urgency. "Enough!" Zhang shouted, grasping the reality of the moment. "I will not be cornered here. Not by you. Not by anyone." And in that very instant, something within May changed. Her posture shifted, eyes flashing with something terrifying and powerful. "You have no idea what you're playing with," she warned the man, her voice suddenly imbued with an otherworldly authority. Before Zhang could decipher the shift in the air, the lights flickered, the walls pulsing with an unseen force. Shadows twisted and darkened the corners where they stood, and he felt his breath hitch. The threat didn't just come from the man, it radiated from hers too. A gasp escaped his lips. What had he gotten himself into? What did she know? "Zhang, listen." May's voice snapped him back from the brink, urgency infused with a deep loyalty. "We need to go now." Suddenly, the corridor behind them lit up with blaring sirens, a continuous wail cutting through the air, drowning out their thoughts. All at once, the danger from the mysterious man and the unknown forces converged, a chaotic tide threatening to engulf them. Zhang reached for May's hand, ready to run, ready to unearth all that was hidden. They needed answers, and they needed to access the power waiting to be unleashed. Together, they stepped prepared to confront the reality ahead as dark forces began to close in. But who were they to trust, and could May's secrets truly shield them from the storm brewing on the horizon? Zhang barely felt the cool metal of the doorknob under his fingers. The blaring sirens hammered in his ears, each wail pushing them closer to the edge. He shot one last look at the dark figure, who now appeared almost amused, as if savoring their panic. "Now, Zhang," the man said, his voice smooth, each word coated in menace. "You can choose to be cooperative, or, well, let us just say your little girl won't be the only casualty in this game." Panic surged within him, twisted tightly with resolve. He gripped May's hand, feeling the smallness of her fingers wrap around his. "Stick close to me," he whispered. "We'll figure this out together." As if responding to the urgency in his voice, May pulled him toward the back of the office, where the flickering lights cast frantic shadows on the walls. "We can't go back," she insisted, darting a glance over her shoulder. "He's not alone." Beyond the door, the noise escalated. More voices joined the wailing sirens, thuds resonated, footsteps were closing in. Zhang's heart raced. What more could they bring? With nowhere left to turn, they stumbled across the open layout of the office, weaving in and out of desks and chairs that loomed like gargoyles. They dashed toward the lobby, the glass doors glaring ahead like a safe haven, gleaming under the cold fluorescent lights. "Your debts will find you, Zhang," the man called out, amusement threading through his voice. "That you can count on." Zhang's breath came in ragged sprints. He couldn't focus on what the man said, his mind whirled around urgency and survival. May led him through the narrow passage of the reception area, her grip unyielding. She was smaller, yet the determination within her felt like a boulder driving them forward. Suddenly, a crash rang out from the stairwell behind them. Zhang's heart sank. More than that, emotion stirred, fear twisted his stomach. He threw a quick glance back, catching sight of shadows moving through the corridor. They weren't just threats anymore, they were a hunter's pack, relentless and closing in. "Do you see the elevator?" Zhang pointed, his voice trembling yet sharp in the turmoil. May nodded but hesitated as if sensing something he could not. "No. We shouldn't wait. Trust me, Zhang." Before he could question her, she pulled him deeper into a back hallway. Posters peeled off the walls like shedding skin, littering the floor as they rushed through. It felt alive and suffocating, vibrating with their anxiety. In that dimly lit corridor, May stopped abruptly, her eyes wide with unspoken fear. "I know a way, but it's dangerous," she whispered, the agency of her earlier confidence dropping into vulnerability. "Anything," he replied, heart thumping, desperate and relentless. "Tell me." "There's a hidden passage," she breathed, glancing around as if expecting someone to stumble upon them any moment. "It leads out to the alley behind the building. We just have to." The echo of footsteps cut through her words, too many to count. Zhang's heartbeat pounded in rhythm with the approach, urgency heightening as the menacing presence of the figure loomed back into his mind. "Now," May urged, and she dove into a narrow door he hadn't noticed. Zhang followed, squeezing through the gap, driven by instinct. The tension thickened, the air damp and stale. The passage spiraled downward, curling into darkness that seemed to claw at him. Anxiety buzzed through Zhang like electricity, he could hardly keep up with the spiraling chaos in his mind. Where were they heading? What awaited them down this dark, twisted path? "Is this really safe?" he asked, unconsciously holding May's hand tighter. "Trust me," she said, locking eyes with him. There was a weight in her gaze, a certainty that revealed layers of her power he hadn't begun to understand. The walls trembled faintly, a whisper of the storm above. Then they heard it, voices, low and conspiratorial, piercing the shadows. They were close. Zhang strained to listen, and sweat trickled down his back. Whatever this shift unlocked, it had led them into uncharted territory, and the danger wasn't just at the surface. "What if they find us?" he asked, fear dangling in his throat like a noose, but May only smiled, her confidence igniting a spark within him. They won tea, she said, inching forward as if the hallway itself was alive. But I need you to believe we're on the edge of something incredible. Zhang felt a pull at that moment, a hint of determination laced with dread. Would he dare to trust her? As they ventured deeper, ready to uncover the mysteries lurking within the unknown, the air thickened with foreboding. What awaited them in the shadows, and could they turn the tide before it was too late? The passage spiraled deeper than Zhang expected, the walls closing in on them like the tightening grip of a noose. Each step felt heavier, the air thickening with dread. They ventured further into the stifling darkness, May's confident grip leading the way, igniting sparks of hope amid the gloom. Do you hear that? May whispered, pausing. Zhang strained to catch the whispers echoing in the dark, a sinister mutter of voices merging, discussing something that made his stomach churn. They're close, he breathed, a fresh wave of panic surging through him. What if they find us? May's eyes sparkled like embers in the dark. They won tea. Just keep moving. There was a fierceness in her tone that pushed back against the terror clinging to him. Zhang swallowed hard, aligning his trust with her unwavering resolve. She darted forward, dragging him along, his mind raced. Who were these pursuers? Why were they hunting them? The world twisted around him, a chaotic blend of shadows and uncertainty. Finally, a glimmer of light beckoned from down the corridor. Hope lifted his spirits, but he instinctively cringed. It felt too easy, too inviting. May, wait, he hissed, tugging on her hand, but she was already lunging toward the light. In a brazen twist, they burst into a small, dimly lit room. Zhang's initial sense of relief faltered as he scanned the space. Papers scattered across the floor, a flickering bulb dangled precariously above them. It looked abandoned yet strangely personal. Look. May pointed at a corkboard jam-packed with photographs and notes. He rushed over just as the low voices from the corridor grew louder. Plans for what? He mumbled, rifling through pictures that flashed before him. Men in dark suits, a meeting in an upscale bar, a handoff that seemed suspicious. Everything clicked in his head with sudden clarity. They were part of something much larger than he had imagined. Zhang glanced back at May, who was staring wide-eyed at the collection. They're planning something big. We have to. Before he could finish, the door slammed shut behind them, a heavy thud cutting off any retreat. The voices stopped abruptly, sending a shiver down his spine. Did they find us? He locked eyes with May, whose expression had shifted from wonder to fear. We need another way out. Now. She urged. With urgency driving them, Zhang pushed aside the jumbled files, revealing a trapdoor hidden beneath old carpets. Heart racing, he flung it open. The smell of fresh air wafted upward. This could be our escape. Go. I'll check the door. May nodded, her face barely masking the terror brewing behind her usually confident demeanor. As he climbed down, the chill of the darkened passage gnawed at him. It felt like stepping into the unknown, uncertainty coiling tighter around his heart. Zhang hesitated, glancing back up to see May poised, listening for any signs of movement. In that frantic moment, a hand shot through the now broken door, grabbing at May's arm. She yelped, flailing against the grip that was all too familiar. One of the suited men. Zhang lunged back up, his heart pounding, adrenaline propelling him to save her. No! He shouted, but as he reached the surface, the room was a swirl of chaos. May's scream echoed in the confines, fighting against the harsh grip of their pursuers. Let her go! Zhang yelled, lunging forward, but in the blink of an eye, another figure emerged from the shadows, blocking his way. Zhang! May shouted, desperation slicing through the air, but the man pulled her closer, a sinister smile creeping across his lips. Zhang's heart plummeted. What had he awakened? The urgency transformed into panic, driving him to confront danger rather than allow May to be taken. He took a step forward, fists clenched, resolve hardening. This was no longer just about survival, it was about standing his ground for May, standing against a tide that threatened to crush them both. As he braced himself for a fight, an explosion of sound shattered the tension, startling all of them. The walls rattled, dust falling as Zhang instinctively shielded Mei. "What now?" he gasped, fear mingling with confusion. In that charged moment, the lights flickered out completely. What lay ahead in the darkness, and could they survive the forces that closed in around them? The darkness swallowed them whole, tightening its grip like a vice. The last flicker of light vanished, leaving them stranded in a void where fear thrived. Zhang's pulse raced, beating against his temples as he tried to push back the chaos swirling in his mind. "Stay close," he whispered fiercely, reaching blindly for Mei's hand. The sudden silence was overwhelming, broken only by their ragged breathing. "Zhang! What is happening?" Mei's voice quivered, drawing him back to her. "Just hang on," he replied, his throat dry. The reality of their situation felt heavy and suffocating. The thud of footsteps echoed in the corridor, but where? The walls stood like silent witnesses, concealing the unseen threats around them. A low groan emerged from somewhere deep within the shadows. It felt alive, crawling under the skin. Panic surged again. "We need to move, now," he urged, pulling her with him, heart pounding in sync with the suffocating sense of dread that draped over them. Zhang felt a gust of air against his face, cold and sharp. "This way!" he shouted, leading Mei toward the direction the draft came from. The passageway constricted, walls sweating with an eerie dampness. Each breath grew harder to take. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a narrow staircase spiraling downwards, its stone steps riddled with grime. Without hesitation, Zhang propelled himself forward, dragging Mei behind him. Surely this descent would lead to freedom or deeper into a trap. With each step downward, the oppressive atmosphere thickened, and then a sound shattered the stillness. A creaking echo roared through the staircase, followed by the heavy thud of booted feet closing in above them. "They're coming!" Mei gasped, her breath hitching with fear. "Faster!" Zhang urged, adrenaline coursing through him. They rushed down the staircase, lungs burning as the steps grew slick beneath them, but when they reached the bottom, they were met with a cavernous chamber. Chains clanked softly in the distance. The air smelled of earth and something else, something metallic, hinting at a grim history. Zhang forced his eyes to adjust to the dim light filtering through a far-off grating. "Look!" Mei whispered, pointing to a series of cages lining the walls, shadows flickering behind their iron bars. "What is this place?" he murmured, dread pooling in his stomach. The noise of footsteps above grew louder, pounding against the earth like a countdown, each thud resonating through his bones. They had to find a hiding spot and quick. With no time to waste, he pulled Mei behind a stalagmite formation jutting out from the ground. They crouched low, their breaths mingling with the damp air as they pressed themselves close to the cold stone. "Do you think they saw us?" Mei asked, her voice barely a whisper. Zhang shook his head, eyes darting for any sign of their pursuers. The footsteps echoed closer, and he could almost feel the vibration through the ground. A sharp gasp lodged in his throat as a beam of light punctured the darkness, cutting through the chamber like a dagger. 3 men emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by the glow of flashlights. They exchanged murmurs, scanning the area, eyes flicking past the very spot where Zhang and Mei hid. "Check the cages," one of them barked, stepping closer to their hiding place. "They couldn't have gone far." Zhang gripped Mei's wrist, the panic palpable between them. Just a breath, just a moment, could unravel everything. His stomach twisted as one of the figures turned their way, a flashlight beam washing over their hiding spot. In that frantic heartbeat, hope mingled with despair. Would they be discovered? What horrors were contained within those iron bars? As the men moved on, Zhang risked a discreet glance at Mei, her eyes wide with fear and determination. There was strength in her grip, a fight that burned quietly between them even in that dark chamber. "Now!" he breathed, diving out from their hiding spot toward a narrow passage on the far side. But before they could make a break for it, a body materialized from the shadows, blocking their path. The men were quick. Too quick. What do we have here? The tall figure grinned, but there was a lethal edge to his smile. Run! Zhang shouted to Mei, but it was too late. With every ounce of energy, he lunged forward. Could he get through? Could he protect her? The world darkened again as the figure lunged, and Zhang could only hope that in the chaos, they would find their escape what awaited them in this underground maze, and would they be able to evade the peril that threatened to swallow them whole. Zhang's world spiraled into a blur as he collided with the figure blocking their escape. The man was solid muscle, and their bodies slammed together, sending Zhang staggering back. Fear ignited primal instincts within him, urging him to fight back or flee. But Mei was still behind him, he couldn't afford to get caught. Grab her! The man shouted, his voice booming in the confined space. Zhang's heart felt like a jackhammer in his chest, drowning out the chaos around him. Without thinking, he swung a fist, catching the man squarely in the jaw. A satisfying crack echoed through the chamber, but it barely fazed the brute, who grinned mockingly. Zhang barely had time to process that his blow had not incapacitated him when the man lunged again. Mei's terrified gasp pierced the air as she instinctively backed away. The world flickered back into focus just in time for Zhang to see the man unleashing a powerful punch aimed at him. He dodged, narrowly avoiding the blow and grabbing Mei's hand, pulling her into motion. Run! He urged, not looking back. They darted toward the narrow path he had spotted earlier, hearts racing. The heavy footsteps of the men echoed behind them, a grim reminder they were not alone. As they sprinted into the passage, the abyss seemed to stretch endlessly before them, a tunnel that swallowed the dim light behind. They raced down, the cold stone walls pressing in like the grip of a predator. The only sound was their hurried breaths and the frantic pounding of their hearts. Where are we going? Mei called out, panic edging her voice. Anywhere but here. Zhang replied, determination lacing his words. We need to find a way out before they catch us. The passage narrowed further, forcing them into a single file. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Zhang's eye. A graffitied door swung ajar about 10 feet ahead. He grabbed Mei's arm, veering toward it. We can hide in there. They slipped inside just as a roar of frustration erupted from the chamber behind them. Zhang slammed the door shut, holding his breath as he pressed against the wood, straining to hear any indication from the other side. The cold chill of dread wrapped around him, his heartbeat metronomizing the tension. The room was dim and cluttered, filled with rows of dusty shelves that reached up to the ceiling. Old equipment lay scattered around, a mix of tools and junk, fragments of what had once been a workshop. Zhang quickly led them behind a rack filled with old crates, the shadows enveloping them like a cloak. Do you think they'll find us? Mei whispered, her words barely audible, filled with uncertainty. Zhang locked eyes with her, trying to project whatever courage he could muster. We'll be okay. Just stay quiet. Moments stretched into hours as they clung to each other in the darkness, holding their breath with every creak of wood or scratch from the outside. Just when Zhang started to believe they might escape, the doorknob rattled violently, a sign that someone was coming. Check in here. A voice called, muffled but booming enough to set off alarm bells in Zhang's mind. Panic enveloped him again. There was no way out, no escape. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against the small, blunt object he had found earlier. A wrench. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. Footsteps echoed as they entered the room, faint beams of light slicing through the dimness. His heart raced, every shadow seemed to leer, ready to pounce. The tension escalated palpably as the figures moved closer to their hiding spot. We have to do something, Zhang whispered urgently. Mei nodded, eyes wide but resolute. Then it happened. One of the figures moved nearly within inches of them. Zhang's heart thudded. All it would take was a single misstep. I'll create a distraction, he murmured, preparing himself for the desperate gamble. When I say go, you run, got it? Mei's grip tightened around his wrist. Zhang, no. He squeezed her hand reassuringly. You need to trust me. He inhaled sharply, bracing himself for the action that was about to unfold. But before he could execute his plan, a chilling sound echoed in the silence, the unmistakable growl of something lurking just beyond the thresholds of the room. What was that? One of the men asked, suddenly alert, their earlier casualness slipping away. Zhang stared into the shadows, fear clawing at his throat. What else was down here with them? Just as the men began turning toward the noise, Zhang felt a deep tremor underfoot, vibrating through the ground like a warning bell. Without warning, the walls around them shuddered, dust cascading from above. The shadows grew darker, and he realized with a sinking dread that they had awakened something sinister in the heart of the maze. Prepare for everything to change, he thought grimly as the trembling escalated, and then everything exploded into chaos. As the ground heaved and the sound echoed through the chamber, Zhang knew one thing for sure: they would have to fight for their lives. What monstrous forces lay hidden in the depths of this ancient underground world, and would they uncover the truth before it was too late? The room shook violently as if a beast were awakening from its slumber. Dust rained down from the ceilings, and the shadows around Zhang and Mei twisted and contorted like living creatures. Zhang's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just an earthquake, they had disturbed something far more dangerous. Zhang Mei's voice quivered, a mix of fear and uncertainty. He looked at her, her youthful face lit by the faint glow of the filters catching the overhead light. He wished he could comfort her, but deep down, he felt the same icy grip of terror. Stay close, he instructed, tightening his grip on the wrench. The way his fingers wrapped around the cold metal felt insufficient compared to the dread creeping in. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he couldn't leave Mei behind. The connection between them was more than just friendship, it was survival. The tremors intensified, splintering the wooden floorboards beneath their feet. The door shuddered violently, rattling as heavy footsteps approached. The men outside were drawing nearer, shouting at each other, their voices laced with tension. Did you hear that? Something's happening. One of them thundered, panic driving their words. Suddenly, with a resounding crack, the door burst open. A figure filled the doorway, silhouetted against the chaos of their surroundings. It was the muscle-bound man from earlier, eyes wide with a mix of fury and horror. They're coming! He shouted, breathless. We need to move. Before Zhang fully grasped the weight of his words, the walls trembled again. A low growl echoed, reverberating through the stone like thunder. It wasn't just any growl, it held a resonance that jolted through Zhang's bones. Get back! Zhang yelled, realizing with dawning horror that whatever they had disturbed was not just an old myth or mere darkness. It was alive, and it was angry. Mei's eyes widened, panic threatening to consume her. What's happening? She breathed. Run! The shout burst from Zhang as he took a step forward, pushing Mei back toward the shadows they had emerged from just moments before. In their haste, chaos erupted. The shadows spilled over the room, and the heavy thud of footsteps morphed into something altogether more monstrous. The man from the doorway, still clutching his comrades behind him, started shouting orders that dissolved into chaos as the growling intensified. Lights flickered above, casting strange patterns as shadows danced across the walls. Something huge scraped against the ground, sending plumes of dust clouding around them. Zhang's instincts urged him to flee, but he was trapped between the looming threat behind them and the unmistakable horror that surged forth from the depths of the darkness. Zhang! Mei's voice snapped him out of his daze, her urgency reigniting his fight-or-flight response. He gathered his courage, taking a deep breath as he grasped Mei's hand tighter. We can't let them find us. If we're gonna survive, we have to go deeper into the maze. But as they turned to escape, the light above flickered one last time before plunging them into darkness. The only illumination now came from the faintest glimmers of panic in their eyes and the sudden, gut-wrenching howl that echoed through the passage behind them. Glimpses caught of shapes moving within the shadows sent Zhang's heart racing. It was far more than they had bargained for. The escape was now entwined with the fight for survival against a lurking terror. Now! Move! He barked, dragging May behind him into the claustrophobic dark of the corridor. The sounds of chaos thumped behind them, a gnawing reminder that whatever lay ahead was no longer just a maze of stone, it had become a battleground. Zhang's chest tightened. They had to make it. But just how far down the nest of horrors had they tread? Then he heard it again, the growl, accompanied by a sickening scuttle that sent chills racing down his spine. Would they find a way out, or had they awakened a nightmare they could never escape? The darkness swallowed them whole. Every step Zhang took felt heavy, dragging him and May deeper into an abyss where fear twisted reality. The growl resonated once more, closer this time, a low panther-like rumble that vibrated through the stone walls, rattling the very marrow of his bones. "Zhang, what is that?" May's whisper trembled, barely audible over the cacophony of echoes. Zhang's heart thumped in his chest, a frantic drumbeat urging him onward. "I don't know," he choked out, forcing himself to sound more composed than he felt. His grip tightened on the wrench, his only weapon against an unseen terror. The shadows loomed menacingly around them, creeping closer with every breath they took. Suddenly, the corridor widened into a cavernous chamber, and the air shifted, thickening with a sweet, musty scent, like rotting leaves. A low, vibrating hum filled the space, not just echoing but pulsating, as if the walls themselves were breathing. They had crossed into something primal, something ancient. Zhang squinted into the darkness, scanning for any signs of movement. "We need to find a way out. This isn't safe." His voice broke slightly at the end, his mind racing with the possible horrors that lurked within the unseen. "Maybe we should just go back," May suggested, panic evident in her wide eyes. Zhang's throat tightened. There was no way they could go back now, not with whatever was hunting them in the shadows. "We can't. There's no time." The hum escalated, morphing into jagged bursts of primal growls and deep hisses that echoed around them like spectral whispers. Zhang caught sight of fleeting shapes darting past the edges of his vision, their forms too fast and too contorted to decipher. "What if it's just a trick?" May whimpered. Shadows shifted, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the darkness itself was listening, waiting. The growling intensified, reverberating off the walls with urgency. "Stay with me," Zhang shouted as he pulled her farther into the chamber. They stumbled upon a strange altar, worn and stained with age. It pulsed faintly under the dim light, glowing like a heartbeat. "What is this?" May said, eyes wide with fear and fascination. "I don't know, but it feels wrong." Zhang studied it, entranced. There was an inscription carved into the stone, symbols he didn't recognize but that felt imbued with dread. As he traced the edges with his finger, a jolt of energy surged through him, causing him to jerk back. Then, the growl turned into a roar, and the shadows erupted, morphing into something much larger, a silhouette of muscle and fury emerging from the darkness. "Run!" Zhang yelled, summoning every ounce of adrenaline within him. He grabbed May's arm, dragging her away from the altar just as a massive form burst forward, obscured in the swirling shadows yet bearing an unmistakable presence of danger. They sprinted down another narrow passage, skidding to a halt as the growl echoed closer. Behind them, the creature surged in a blur of movement, claws slicing through the air, a mere fraction away from tearing through their flesh. "What do we do?" May's voice cracked, fear stark and raw. Zhang's mind raced. They needed to devise a plan or risk being hunted. There has to be a way to stop it, distract it. "What about the altar? Can we use it?" May's suggestion was desperate but sparked a flicker of hope in Zhang's chest. He turned back, eyeing the altar, the weight of their fate pressing heavily on his shoulders. "We might have to. But first, we must lure it away." Just as he spoke, the dim light shifted, revealing shimmering eyes fixated on them. The creature was on the move again, lunging with terrifying speed. Zhang's heart sank. This was their last chance. With one final glance at May, the determination ignited in his chest, and he steeled himself for the reckoning to come. "We either make it through this, or we don't make it at all," he declared, racing back toward the altar, knowing that their only hope lay in facing the monster that had awakened beneath the earth. but as they neared their only chance for survival, Zhang felt a surge of dread scramble through him. The growl morphed again, now tainted with something darker, a voice that echoed in the caverns of his mind, warning him of something unknown he had yet to uncover. What were they truly awakening, and would they have the courage to confront it? The ground trembled as Zhang and Mei approached the altar, its pulse echoing like a heartbeat in their ears. The creature, a terrifying shadow with glowing eyes, was now mere steps behind them, its breath hot and rancid, filling the air with desperation. "Zhang, hurry!" Mei cried, her voice trembling with fear. Zhang nodded, every instinct urging him forward. The altar loomed larger, a surreal beacon in the chaos. He had no clue how it would help them, but it was their only shot. Before reaching it, he turned to face their pursuer, feeling the weight of certainty drop upon him. "I'll distract it," he said, his voice steadying against the tide of panic. Mei's eyes widened. "What? No. You can't. I have to," he insisted, forcing himself to take a step toward the shadow. "Just trust me, and be ready to run to the altar." With that, he lifted the wrench, feeling its cold, metallic weight ground him in the moment. The growl grew louder, morphing into a furious roar that seemed to shake the very stones around them. "Hey! Over here!" Zhang shouted, waving his arms wildly, his heart pounding against his ribs. The eyes locked onto him, filled with an insatiable hunger. The creature paused, drawn by the challenge he posed. Just as Zhang had hoped, it hesitated, its muscles taut with tension but ready to leap. "Now!" He yelled at Mei, but she hesitated, glancing at Zhang with eyes wide open. "Go! I'll catch up." With desperation in her gaze, she sprinted back toward the altar, and Zhang followed, positioning himself between his friend and the relentless monster. The air thickened with an electric tension as the beast bounded forward. Zhang could feel the ground shift under its weight, the very earth trembling with its approach. He braced himself, heart racing, as the creature surged through the shadows, its jaws snapping dangerously close. Zhang sidestepped, swinging the wrench with all his strength, catching the creature in its side. A sickening crunch resonated in the dim air, and the beast howled in rage, the sound reverberating off the stone walls. It staggered but quickly turned its fury toward him. "Move, Mei! Now!" Zhang shouted again as he darted to the side, drawing it away from her path. She reached the altar, breathless and terrified, her eyes flickering over the inscriptions. "Zhang! There is something here. I think it's of." The moment she spoke, the beast lunged again, and Zhang barely avoided its massive claw. He felt the rush of air past him as the claw missed by inches. "Get it to stop. Do whatever you can." Mei's hands moved frantically across the inscriptions engraved into the altar. Tortured shadows merged and danced around them, the creature still pursuing Zhang. With one desperate push, Mei's fingers traced a symbol, and the altar began to hum louder, its glow intensifying. The air crackled, vibrating with the power unleashed. "No!" Zhang shouted, realizing what she was attempting. The altar wasn't just an object, it bore a terrible force, the very thing that had lain dormant for centuries. "Mei, don't." But it was too late. The altar responded. A wave of energy surged outward, and the creature halted, its eyes flickering in confusion. Yet that power didn't just stop the beast, it morphing the shadows around it. Dark tendrils wrapped themselves around the creature, pulling it back as it emitted a fearsome roar. Zhang realized the altar held more than they needed, it had the power to control whatever had been unleashed. "Mei, we have to be careful. We might be making it worse. Don't stop now," she shouted, her voice filled with raw determination. "It's working. We can control it." Yet as the creature writhed against the dark tendrils, a sense of dread washed over Zhang. What if they were binding it, only to unleash something much, much worse? Under his breath, a prayer formed amidst the chaos, muffled by the howling wind. "We need." The growl escalated into a bone-chilling silence, abruptly snapping Zhang's thoughts. A new shadow emerged from the stillness, darker than the last, shifting subtly, poised to strike. Zhang! May's scream erupted through the chaos, and everything immediately went cold. Before him, hidden in the abyss, was a nightmarish figure, a far greater terror than they had faced. Zhang's heart sank as they realized they had merely scratched the surface of what lay beneath something ancient and insatiable. And now, its gaze fixated on them. What had they really awakened? The ground continued to tremble, and Zhang felt the breath leave his lungs as the unimaginable horror revealed itself. It was massive, a creature wrapped in shadows and radiating a suffocating power that threatened to engulf them both. May stood frozen by the altar, the pulsing energy flickering erratically, sending shadows spiraling into chaos. Zhang! May cried, her voice laced with pure terror, snapping him back from the abyss that threatened to swallow them whole. What do we do? They had gone too far now, and there would be no turning back. The colossal beast loomed, its eyes burning with ferocity, ready to lash out. Instinctively, Zhang stepped in front of May, shielding her with his own body. We fight, he declared, gripping the wrench tighter. We can't let it take you. But deep down, doubt began to seep into his heart. He had seen monsters before, but this was something supernatural, something that defied the very laws of nature. What if it's too strong? What if we can't control it? He thought, feeling a tightness in his chest. Keep the altar close. May yelled, her voice cutting through the panic. We can channel its energy, control it. Her eyes sparkled with determination, anchoring his wavering resolve. Right, Zhang said, pushing aside his fear. Together, they took a step towards the altar, united in purpose. As they neared, the inscription glowed brighter, a soft hum vibrating in the air. We need to focus. May instructed, her fingers brushing over the symbols with urgency. The growl of the beast echoed louder, its impatience palpable, yet Zhang felt the strange gravity of the altar channeling energy between them. Shadows twisted, flicking around him in grotesque patterns as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. Together! May shouted, and without thinking, Zhang reached down, placing his hand alongside hers on the altar. Instantly, a pulse of energy surged through them. A rush of warmth ignited within him, and he felt his fear transform into an incredible power. The connection felt instinctive and ancient, as if this was what they were meant to do all along. With a fierce shout, they unleashed their combined will upon the beast, forcing it to halt. The dark tendrils surged forward, ensnaring the creature's limbs, pulling it back into the shadowed depths. Zhang, now! May urged, determination ringing in her voice. We have to seal it away. Focus your thoughts. Zhang closed his eyes, honing in on the terror that lay before them. Every dark deal, every ambition from their world that this creature represented, every fear that had dragged him down came rushing to the front of his mind. He pushed them all into the energy channeling from the altar, pouring his resolve into the space. You don't own me. We're done being prey. The energy exploded outward in colors they had never imagined as the altar lit up like a beacon, creating a barrier around them. The beast let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the chamber as the tendrils leaped forth, wrapping tighter around it. No! This can't be! A voice roared from the shadows. Zhang realized the figure was one of the men they had escaped from, fear paling his face as he gaped at the resurrection of the power. Fool! The shadowed figure yelled, wrestling with the encroaching bindings of the altar. You have no idea what you are tampering with. But Zhang no longer cared. We do! He exclaimed, strength pulsing through him, flooding his veins with purpose. And we will make sure you and your kind never threaten anyone again. The beast howled one final time before staggering backwards, battling against its own encasing captivity. We're doing it! May shouted, the thrill of triumph radiating from her. Together, they united their will, chanting the rhythmic incantation from the altar. The energies danced wildly, intertwining, radiant against the dark. In one glorious moment of clarity, both of them felt the power solidify and the creature's ferocity wane. The shadows began to dissipate, pulling the beast back into the arch of darkness from which it had come, sealing it away. Once more. As the last echoes of the growls faded into silence, Zhang and Mei collapsed to the cold ground, breathing heavily, trembling from adrenaline and relief. Darkness surrounded them, but it seemed lighter now. They had done it together, they had stopped a threat that could have unleashed chaos upon the world. "We made it," Zhang panted, looking to Mei, whose eyes shone with a blend of pride and wonder. "Yeah, we made it," she smiled softly, those small, innocent features transformed by their mutual strength. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed in the chamber, stirring dust around them. They both looked at the ceiling, senses on high alert. Would more threats come? Yet, as the dust settled and light began to pierce through the darkness, they felt hope surge. Not just for themselves but for the potential that lay within. "We have to go," Mei urged, rising with resolve. "This place won't stay quiet long." Hand in hand, they navigated through the remnants of their harrowing journey, finding their way back through the winding paths, the darkness lifting as they emerged into the twilight above ground. As they stepped out into the soft orange glow of the sunset, they exchanged a glance. Strength and resilience shimmered in their eyes, a bond forged in the crucible of fear and miraculous courage. "I won't forget this," Zhang whispered. "Neither will I." "And if they come back," Mei trailed off, determination lacing her words, "we'll be ready." With that compact promise, they walked away from the shadows, stepping into a new dawn as the world stretched ahead of them, vast and limitless. Before the screen fades to black, remember this moment. It's not just a story, it's a declaration of friendships forged in adversity, the echoes of triumph over darkness. Now, this is your moment to act. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Did you see the twist coming? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is essential. Let us keep this incredible journey going.